The other class had quite a few problems they wanted to see. So shout them out, go. 18. That's it. The other class had like 10 problems up here.
12.
What?
12.
I got 12. That's it? This class is just way smarter. What? Okay, this class is just way smarter. 16. Well, at least, you know, if you were smart, you would ask the even questions, right? Because you don't have the answers, right? Those are the only even problems?
10. 14.
Wait till I start walking away and then shout it out. Now, as we found out in the other class, you can answer all of these questions. Now, last night's homework, you guys didn't even draw any graphs, right? You guys just have to answer questions about it and then match the graph to the equation. So you're not going to do any actually graphing until tonight's homework. Okay, now we can answer all of these questions by simply looking at the base graph. And that's what they want. They just want you to familiarize yourselves with the base graph. So here. And then so if you have cosine x, it looks like this, right? And then if you copy and paste it, it looks like that, right? And of course, you can keep on copying and pasting as needed. And then the sine graph. Sine looks like this. Okay, so what are we starting with? Number 10. What is number 10? What is the y-intercept of y equal cosine x? Are you serious? Look, here's the graph of y equal cosine x. What is the y-intercept? 1. You know, it's easy. You guys just want to know the answers because it's even, yeah? Number 12. For what numbers between negative pi and pi inclusive is the graph of y equal cosine x decreasing? Now, what does decreasing mean?
Slope is negative.
Yeah, the slope is negative or the graph is going downhill, right? So between negative pi and pi, they are asking when is the graph going downhill, decreasing? Well, in between here and here, right? Look, it's going downhill over here, right?
0.
So how do you write that? Well, I will accept a lot of things. Like I will accept this, like you can put, no, let me give you the correct answer. 0 to pi. Or you can write x is between 0 and pi. However, some books do this. They also include the endpoints, but actually that's not quite correct. But if you wrote it, I'll accept it. So if you wrote any one of these, you got it correct. Because actually at this point and at that point, the graph is neither decreasing nor increasing. Yeah? So that's why it shouldn't include 0 and pi. But if you included it at this level, I would accept it. So that's number 12. Okay, number 14. What is the smallest value of y equal cosine x? Are you serious? Look at this graph. What is the smallest y coordinate on this graph right there? -1, right? And the biggest is 1, right? Okay, so that takes care of that one. And then number 16. For what numbers x between 0 and 2 pi does cosine x equal 0? Now this is a much more important question. So between 0 and 2 pi, when is this graph equal to 0? When is the y coordinate equal to 0? Right there and right there. So when is that? Pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2, right? That's when the y coordinate. What about for the graph of sine? When is the graph of y equals sine x equal to 0? Here, here, and there. So when would that be?
Negative.
Well, I think they're asking just between 0 and 2 pi, yes, it would be 0, pi, and 2 pi. Because isn't that one of the questions? Yeah, for number 13. No, number 15. Okay, and then finally, number 16, or did we just do 16? Yeah, we just did. So number 18. For what numbers between negative 2 pi and 2 pi does cosine of x equal to 1? So here's the graph of cosine x. From here to here, when is the y coordinate equal to 1? There, there, and there. When would that be? Negative 2 pi, 0, and 2 pi, right? And then part B of the question is, when is the graph equal to negative 1? That would be here and there. When would that be? Negative pi and pi. So all of these questions, they just want you to get accustomed to the graph. So it looks like all the odd questions were asking you about sine x, and all the even questions were asking you about cosine x. So if you have the graph right in front of your face, you can answer all the questions, right? Are you sure that's the last of the questions? No, you asked. Number 4. The function y equal a sine omega x, where a is greater than 0, has amplitude 3 and period 2. Okay, this is a good question to ask. Well, so you have y equals capital A sine omega x. Now, you guys know that's the Greek letter omega. That's not a W though. Who takes physics here? So omega. You guys learned that before. But it doesn't matter. In this class, I probably just will call it B. And it's just a letter, okay? Okay, but let's just keep it omega for now. Okay, what problem are we doing for? Has amplitude 3 and period 2. So they're asking, what is A and what is omega? Well, if the amplitude is 3, doesn't this number tell you the amplitude? Right? So that means A is 3. Amplitude is the absolute value of this number in the front, remember? And then the period, well, you know what? I'm going to change this to a B because that's the way most books will do it. Okay? Now it says the period is equal to 3. No, 2. What did we learn yesterday? When you have a sine or a cosine function, how do you figure out the period? 2 pi over b. So 2 pi over b has to equal to 2 because it says the period is 2. So how do you solve for b? Right here. Cross multiply. 2b equals 2 pi. Divide both sides by 2. b equals pi. There you go. Those are your answers there. So the absolute value of this thing is the amplitude, and 2 pi over b is the period. That's all you have to know. And then number 6, true or false? The graphs of y equals sine x and y equal cosine x are identical except for a horizontal shift. Yeah, we saw it yesterday, right? This graph and this graph are exactly the same except one is just shifted over. That's the only difference between the two. So the answer is true. Okay, now in tonight's homework, you're actually going to draw graphs, and then they're going to give you a graph, and then you have to write the equation. So I will do 2 examples, and then I'm just going to give you the rest of the time to do your homework. Okay, so any other questions? Last one. Okay, easy. So next time, when I see you on Monday, then we're going to graph all the other functions, secant x, cosecant x, tangent x, and cotangent x. That should be fun. Okay, so let me 2 examples. Now I showed you this yesterday, but that's okay, we'll do it again. Y equals negative 2 cosine 3x. I might have done the exact same thing yesterday, but I don't remember. Okay, now what do I want from you? Well, if you look at the directions for the book homework, it says graph each function and show at least 2 cycles, 2 periods. So you have to show at least 2 periods. So this is what I do when I graph. Now, if you want to use graph paper, you can, but when you do it on the quiz or the test, everything is going to be freehand. So 1, 2, 3. So what I do is I just graph 1 period and then I copy and paste. So here's the base graph. Now this is cosine now. What does the cosine graph look like? It looks like this. Right? just remember, cosine of 0 is 1, so it starts here. Sine of 0 is 0, so it starts there. So if you just, in fact, if you could just remember 0 and pi over 2, cosine of pi over 2 is 0. So if you remember these 2 points, I mean, right, everything is just gonna follow the pattern, right? And for the sine graph, if it's a sine graph, what? How does the graph look? What is the sine of 0? What is sine of pi over 2? 1. Once you get those 2 points, then you know the graph is going to go like this, right? So I don't know how you guys remember it, whatever, you got to figure it out, yeah? Okay, so how do you graph this? Well, what does this do to the graph? That's a horizontal shrink by a factor of 3, but remember what I told you yesterday? How should you think about it? This will multiply the x coordinates by 1/3, so then you just do this. See, it's just way faster to do that. And then, if you want to label these things, like when we do next week's Monday's lessons, it's going to be important to know these things here. Once you get this one, just divide it by 2 to get this one, right? What's 2 pi over 3 cut into 2? What's half of that? Pi over 3, right? And then what's half of pi over 3? Pi over 6. So that means each hash mark is going to be pi over 6. So we got 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, right, which is pi over 2, and then 4 pi over 6. That's how you label these things, because then, well, you'll find out on Monday. Okay, now what does this do to the graph? It multiplies the y coordinates by 2, so 2 and negative 2. And then finally, what does that negative sign do? It reflects it over the x-axis. So if you flip it over the x-axis, this is what the graph looks like now. And then copy it, once you got one period, just copy and paste. So where do you want to paste it? Over here or over there? It doesn't matter. Now on your homework it says show at least 2 cycles. So you can show more if you want. You want to do 3 cycles for funsies? No, we want to do the minimum, Mr. Park. Okay, so where you want to put it? Here or there? Pick one, A or B? B. Oh, that's exactly what the other class did. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if that's 2 pi over 3, this would be, this doesn't look like the same length, so I'm going to do it again. So jump. Okay, so if that's 2 pi over 3, that's 4 pi over 3 then, right? And then it's just going to keep following the same thingy. That's not one of my best creations. Good enough. So that's what's expected from you. If you want to put more periods in, you can. But it says at least 2. Now the other part of the homework is they're going to give you a graph, and then you have to write the equation. So here we go. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then something like this. This is good enough. So let's see, let me think. Okay, there. Write the equation of this. Now, is this going to be a sine function or a cosine function? Since look, it starts at 0 right there. This is going to be a sine one. See, you know it's going to be a cosine one if it starts here or there, right? At the max or the min. But if it starts at 0, you know it's going to be a sine one. And is it going to be a positive sine one or a negative sine one? Yeah, negative, because a positive sine graph goes like this. But this one, see how it went down? That means it got reflected over the x-axis, so that means it's going to be a negative sine graph. Okay, so once we figure that out, so we know it's going to be sine, and we know it's going to be negative, we just have to figure out what that is and what that is, right? Now this one tells you the amplitude, right? Well, look at this. Normally sine goes from -1 to 1. What did I multiply the y values by? 4. So what does A have to be? 4. It's got to be 4. So that one's easy. The amplitude is always the easiest. Now, how do you figure out this b thing here? Well, there's two ways to do it. One, you can just memorize. What's the period of a cosine or sine function? 2 pi over b, right? And what is the period here? No.
6.
Of one period, no, it's not 6 either. It goes from here to here. Isn't that one period right there? And then it starts repeating itself. This is one period. So what is that? That's not 6. Yeah, because this is 12, so this is like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. The period is 8. So 2 pi over b has to equal 8. Therefore, b has to be what? Well, if you cross multiply, 8b is equal to 2 pi. Therefore, divide both sides by 8. What is b? If you reduce that down. 2 goes into 8 4 times pi over 4. So this is pi over 4. There you go. That's the equation. Now, that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is, now, if this were a normal sine graph or a negative sine graph, let's do it this way. Normally, this would be 2 pi, right? Over there, right? But it's 8. So you got to figure out, what do I need to multiply that by to get 8? Well, first of all, there has to be a pi in the denominator so you can cancel it out. The pi's off, right? So what has to go up there to get 8? 4, right? Because 2 times 4 is 8. So that means I have to multiply the x values by 4 over pi. Therefore, what do I put there? Pi over 4, right? Because look, have you guys forgotten already? Like over here, this one. What does this do to the graph? It multiplies the x coordinates by 1/3, the reciprocal of that number. So if you want to multiply the x coordinates by 4 over pi, then the reciprocal of that has to go there, pi over 4. So which explanation you like better? That one or just memorize 2 pi over b? Probably 2 pi over b is easier. Anyway, so that's your homework tonight. That's all you got. You got graphing problems, and then the second half of tonight's homework is they give you the graph, you write the equation. It's easy. And there's no shifting. We're not going to worry about shifting left to right. That's going to be Tuesday's lesson. But I'm not seeing you Tuesday. Go to Wednesday's lesson. Then we shift the graph left and right, and up and down. Well, we'll worry about that when it comes. So any other questions? Okay, so, so you guys only have 33 minutes now. That's fine, don't worry, I'll excuse you a little early since it's right before lunch. How does 12:14 sound? Don't worry. Stop worrying. So if I were you, I would do my homework now, and then I don't even have to worry about it while I'm watching the Super Bowl. Yep.